Hi, and welcome to Module 2 of the Beginner's Guide to Project-Based Learning, or PBL, by everydaypbl.com. Module 2 is going to focus on the culminating event. So let's go ahead and jump right in. You need to make sure you have your PLP, and we're going to go ahead and scroll to that part where we talk about the culminating event. All right, so the culminating event. We have 4 steps in this process. And this is going to help us keep the project focused on the end goal. So step 1 is to create a driving question. This driving question is something for your students. It's going to allow them to kind of continually access those knows and need to knows and drive the instruction. So eventually you'll be able to create your own, and you won't have to use any of the tricks to get it. But until you start developing your own driving questions, we recommend using a we do so statement. How can we input what you want your students to be, do input what your students are going to do, so that input the end result. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example here. Once again, just to remind you, the project that I'm modeling here is my freshman English's first project, and they're going to be building a board game based on one or more Greek myths, and it's going to be played as a review by the sophomores before they read Antigone. Now for my freshmen, their skills again are going to be characterization, point of view, elements of fiction, figurative language, maybe some Greek and Latin roots in there. So the driving question for them is going to be, how can we as narrative game makers analyze narrative elements in Greek mythology so we can create a board game that tell those tales to help teachers review the basic stories of Greek mythology. So we basically follow that we do so. We're going to be game makers. We're going to analyze elements in Greek mythology so we can create a board game that will help other teachers review the basic stories of Greek mythology. So again, follow that template, we do so, and you'll be just fine with the driving question. Moving down, we're going to next look at step 2, which is the performance products. And this is going to be really what your end game is. What are your students going to produce by project's end? And the real question here is, what kind of intelligence are you asking them to show? Do you have a little bit of everything? So like the kinesthetic learner is going to be able to show that they understand the concepts. Your tactile learner, are they going to be able to show that they understand the concepts? Where does it fit in with Bloom's Revised? Or if you're using Kirkpatrick's model, Kirkpatrick's intelligence spectrum. All right. If I'm saying Bloom's Revised or Kirkpatrick and you're saying I have no idea what you're talking about, there are some links here that you could kind of educate yourself on the multiple intelligences. But you want to make sure you're hitting those application levels, those higher levels of thinking in your projects. So let's go back to our exemplar, and again, the performance products that they're going to be doing are going to be threefold. Number 1, they're going to be having a game board. And that game board is going to take us through the narrative elements. They're going to be able to show that they understand the narrative arc, characters, point of view, and all of those narrative elements through that game board's creation. Technical writing is another component of that, and that's a very, very specific type of expository writing. It requires a significant different voice than what they're used to. So it's going to be kind of fun for them to practice and play with that. Moving down, they are going to have to write another expository essay, and we're going to publish them to a WordPress site, and we're going to make sure that that's available to those sophomores as they get ready to read Antigone. It'll be kind of like a Cliff Notes on steroids specifically for them. The next thing I added in here is peer evaluation, because part of this project is their first project here at New Tech San Antonio. I want to teach them how to collaborate. So we're going to have a part of their grade be, did you play nice with others, or did you coast and let other people do your work for you? So that peer evaluation is actually going to be a performance product because I am going to be teaching them how to work in a group. So moving down now to step 3. Step 3 is going to focus on the literacy task. This is one of the most important parts of project-based learning. we are striving for literacy across all curriculums. And so it really doesn't matter if you're just having them do some short writing, maybe a reflective piece, or you're making them do a 5-page essay. You need to build in some form of literacy, writing literacy in particular, into your projects. It is the expectation of our administration that we, in every single class, have a multiple page response every 9 weeks. So let's give a quick rundown on the modes of writing. You have narrative. Narrative is your storytelling, your reflection, your personal history. Then you have expository. Expository is going to be informational. Technical writing is also considered technically expository because it's all informational. And then at last you have persuasive. Persuasive is your argumentation, your debate, where students have to defend or prosecute a topic. Now, understand that different writing modes have different rules and techniques, so you need to make sure that you're well versed in those before you assign that mode. Or you pair up with someone who is, and you have some cross-class collaboration, which is never frowned upon. So get with that English teacher and say, hey, I want to do this writing thing. Can we make it work? Moving down, let's look at our exemplars first. Apologize. So my exemplar, I'm going to be all expository here. It's going to be describing a process or event. We're going to be analyzing both an event or text or a topic, which is their rules. So I have 2 prompts that I've listed there as why was there chosen myth or of particular significance in the canon of Greek mythology? All right, and this is going to be their expository essay that's kind of going to the WordPress site and to the sophomores later. And they're going to take and they're going to have read 4 or 5 different myths, and they're going to pick one and say why it's significant. Why is it studied? Why do we care? So that's going to be their first one. That's going to be the expository piece at length. And then their technical writing is how does one play your game and how does one win? With that essay, we're going to have to really work on stripping away the voice, because if you've ever read rules or instruction manuals, there's not a whole lot of personal voice in there. And so it's going to be a fun little exercise for our students to kind of write without themselves appearing in the text. All right, now we can move on to step 4. Step 4 is our pause and reflect. And so we have what looks like 4 questions again. The first question reads, to what extent do the products represent something significant and meaningful beyond my classroom? The real question here is, does the learning stop at your door, or do you force your students beyond the classroom walls? All right, that's going to be the question, is does the learning stop there? How will the written product or literacy task require students to review data and info and synthesize knowledge from their sources? What research are they going to have to do for this project? How are they going to find relevant sources? Are you going to give them those sources, or are you going to teach them how to get there? We'll talk more about that in Module 3. To what extent will students see the connection between the written product and literacy task and the performance products? So this literacy task that you're having them do, is it a standalone, or does it actually integrate with what they're doing end game? And then the last question, when assessing these products, what will I look for in students' work as evidence of content mastery? Are you looking for process? Are you looking for thesis? Are you looking for evidence? Here's the nice thing about writing, is you don't always have to grade holistically. You don't always have to grade the entire essay. With this one, more often than not, I'm probably going to end up grading, did they actually go through the writing process? Meaning, did they do a pre-write? Did they do a rough draft? Did they revise and edit? And did they take it to a final copy? I'm going to grade for thesis. Do they have a thesis, and is that thesis supported? I may or may not grade organization on this one. I may or may not grade voice. So that's the nice part about writing, is you don't have to grade everything in every essay. So let's go ahead and look at the exemplar. And in my exemplar, I talk about how, honestly, it might be a little weak, but because the audience for their project is going to be so real, I would imagine that there's going to be some pressure to make sure that they do it right. Because they don't want to have the game board that no sophomore wants to play. It's looking at question number 2, they're going to have to go beyond just the text to answer that significant question. they're going to have to do a little bit of study on Greek mythology, and I'm going to probably end up providing them a lot of that resource. The lit task is going to serve as a springboard. Before they can get to game board design and game board, they're going to have to get that done, and we'll talk about that in Module 4 when you see how I've arranged the benchmarks, because the literacy task is one of the benchmarks. And then last, when you look at, they're going to have to show mastery of the elements of fiction, because if they don't, their game board's not going to make any sense. So be honest when you're answering these pause and reflect questions, and if the answer is it could be better, well, write that down and then see if you can make it better. Anyway, thank you for listening to Module 2, the culminating event. Hang around, Module 3 is right around the corner. We'll talk about targeted skills.